The sea looked calm, flat water, clear skies, routine patrol conditions. But calm seas don't mean calm intentions. For a US Navy destroyer operating forward in the Western Pacific, this was another day of presence operations, until a single system status changed. The first indication: it wasn't visual. No missiles, no sudden maneuvers, no warning call on the radio. It was electronic, a sharp change on the destroyer's sensors, brief, precise, and unmistakable. A radar emission cut through the background clutter. Not a search radar, not navigation, something else. Why this signal mattered. Search radars look everywhere. Fire control radars look at one thing. They don't scan, they don't wander, they focus. And when they focus, it's usually for a reason. Unverified, initial emitter ID. Unverified OSINT later suggested the radar emission matched characteristics associated with Chinese naval fire control systems. No official confirmation of the emitting platform or radar type was released, but the implication was immediate. The US destroyer had been targeted. The Chinese warship, several nautical miles away, a Chinese surface combatant, was operating on a roughly parallel course. At first glance, nothing about its posture appeared aggressive. No sudden course change, no increase in speed, no visible weapons activity. But radar doesn't need to shout to be threatening. What fire control radar really means. Fire control radar isn't a warning, it's a step. It means the system is measuring distance, tracking speed, calculating intercept solutions. In short, it's the radar used just before weapons employment. That's why militaries treat it seriously. The destroyer's bridge goes quiet. Inside the US ship, the atmosphere changed instantly. No panic, no raised voices, just focus. Reports flowed upward, data flowed outward. The destroyer didn't maneuver immediately. That was deliberate. Reacting too fast can escalate. Reacting too slow can invite danger. The escort picture expands. The destroyer wasn't alone. Data links connected it to a broader naval network, other ships, aircraft, and command nodes far beyond the horizon. Within moments, the radar incident wasn't just a ship-level issue, it was a task force concern. Unverified, network alert. Some unverified reports suggested the radar event was shared across allied networks for situational awareness. No official acknowledgement of such dissemination was made, but information moves fast at sea. Why this was a dangerous moment. Locking fire control radar doesn't mean firing, but it forces a calculation. Is this intimidation, a systems test, or a pre-attack posture? The wrong answer can change history. The Chinese warship holds course. That's what made it worse. The Chinese vessel did not turn away. It did not disengage. It did not clarify intentions. Instead, it maintained course, steady and confident. While the radar emission persisted, the silent standoff begins. Minutes passed. The fire control radar stayed on. Every second added pressure. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't accidental. Fire control systems don't slip. They are activated intentionally. Unverified duration estimate. Unverified assessments later suggested the radar remained active long enough to generate a stable firing solution. This claim remains unconfirmed, but even a brief lock is enough to send a message. The US destroyer's options. Commanders faced a familiar but dangerous set of choices. Maneuver away, reduce risk, signal vulnerability, activate countermeasures, escalate electronically, maintain posture, project confidence. Each option carried consequences. They chose posture. The response, without escalation. The destroyer did something subtle. It adjusted speed, slightly, not to flee, not to charge, just enough to alter targeting geometry. At the same time, its own sensors sharpened focus. Unverified emissions control. Unverified OSINT suggested the destroyer maintained strict emissions control to avoid escalating the encounter. No confirmation was released. Still, the ship was fully aware. Why this was a signal too. Warships speak in movement. Small changes in speed and bearing communicate confidence or challenge. This move said, I see what you're doing, and I'm not intimidated. The tension builds. The distance between the ships closed slightly, not dangerously, but noticeably. Sea state remained calm. Visibility remained high, which meant there would be no excuses if something went wrong. What no one said out loud. Everyone understood the stakes. A fire control lock is often the last step before missiles leave the rails. And once missiles are airborne, there is no rewind. The moment before the turn. Then something changed. The Chinese warship adjusted its radar profile, not off, not fully disengaged, changed, and at the same time its course shifted by a few degrees. Was this de-escalation or preparation for something else? Because what happened next forced US commanders to reassess whether this was intimidation or the opening move of something far more dangerous. The radar profile didn't shut off. That detail mattered more than anything else. Across the US destroyer's combat systems, operators noticed the same thing at once. The fire control radar had changed behavior, but it had not disengaged. This was not a clean break, it was a transition, the most dangerous kind of change. In naval encounters, there are two reassuring outcomes. The radar turns off, or the ship turns away. What happened here was neither. The Chinese warship altered its emission pattern, tightening its beam, refining its focus, while adjusting course by only a few degrees. That combination is unsettling. It suggests intent is evolving, not ending. Unverified emission characteristics. Unverified OSINT analysis later suggested the radar behavior resembled tracking refinement rather than disengagement, though no official confirmation of radar mode changes was released. Still, the effect was unmistakable. The lock felt deliberate. Why fire control radar is a red line. Fire control radar occupies a special place in naval rules of the road. It is not illegal. It is not an attack, but it is widely understood as a pre-attack posture. In many naval doctrines, it is the final step before weapons employment, which is why it carries weight far beyond its signal strength. The US destroyer's internal shift. Inside the destroyer, posture shifted, quietly, decisively. Weapons systems transitioned from passive awareness to readiness. Not armed, not activated, ready. Every operator understood the distinction. Unverified weapons posture. Some unverified reports later suggested defensive systems were placed in a heightened readiness state without crossing engagement thresholds. No official confirmation was released, but readiness does not need confirmation to be real. Why this moment was unlike previous encounters. US and Chinese ships cross paths often. Close passes, radio warnings, shadowing. Those incidents are tense but familiar. A sustained fire control radar targeting event is different. It collapses reaction time. It forces decision-making. It removes ambiguity. The sea remains deceptively calm. That's what made it surreal. No storm, no poor visibility, no mechanical issues. If something went wrong, there would be no environmental excuse, only choices. The command dilemma. US commanders faced a narrow decision window. Every option had consequences. Turn away reduces immediate risk, but signals submission challenge electronically, escalates the encounter. Hold course risks further pressure. They chose to hold, but holding does not mean doing nothing. The response, subtle but powerful. The destroyer adjusted course by a fraction, barely noticeable. To a civilian observer, it would look like routine seamanship. To a fire control radar, it changes everything. Tracking solutions must be recalculated. Intercept geometry shifts. Confidence erodes. Unverified targeting disruption. Unverified assessments suggested the maneuver complicated continuous tracking without escalating emissions. This remains speculative, but the timing was precise. The Chinese warship reacts. Moments later, the Chinese vessel adjusted speed. Not dramatically, just enough to maintain relative position. That move erased any doubt. This was not accidental. This was intentional interaction. Why maintaining position is a signal. Maintaining position during a radar lock says one thing clearly. I am comfortable here. Comfort in proximity is a form of dominance signaling. It tests resolve without firing a shot. The standoff locks in. For several long minutes, neither ship backed down. No radio calls, no warning signals, no visible weapons activity. Just steel, sensors, and restraint. This was a modern naval duel, fought with discipline instead of missiles. Unverified communication silence. Some unverified reports suggested no direct radio communication occurred during the peak of the encounter. This remains unconfirmed. Silence can be louder than words. Why this was extremely risky. Fire control radar incidents are dangerous because they compress time. If a missile launches, accidentally or intentionally, there may be seconds to respond. There is no room for clarification once that happens. That's why these moments matter. The turning point. Then, without warning, the radar changed again. This time, decisively. The focused beam widened, tracking loosened, the fire control signature degraded, not instantly, but clearly. Unverified radar disengagement. Unverified OSINT later suggested the fire control radar was either powered down or transitioned back to a non-targeting mode. No official statement confirmed this, but to operators watching the displays, the pressure lifted. The Chinese warship turns away. Seconds later, the Chinese vessel altered course more noticeably. Not a retreat, not a sprint away. A measured turn, opening distance. This was de-escalation. Why the order of events mattered. The radar changed before the ship turned. That sequence matters. It suggests the decision was intentional, not reactive. The message had been sent and received. The destroyer does not pursue. The US destroyer did not chase, did not illuminate, did not escalate. It maintained course. That restraint preserved the outcome. Escalation after de-escalation would have rewritten the story. The standoff ends quietly. Distance increased. Radar emissions normalized. The ocean returned to routine patterns. To the outside world, nothing had happened. But inside both crews, everything had. What the US Navy gained in encounters like this are intelligence events. Without firing a shot, the destroyer's crew learned radar behavior under pressure, duration thresholds, reaction timing, command, discipline. This is information that cannot be gathered in exercises. Unverified intelligence assessment. Some unverified analysts believe the incident contributed to broader electronic warfare understanding. These claims remain speculative. Still, experience is a form of data. What China was testing. This was not an attack. It was a probe. A test of response speed, rules of engagement, confidence under pressure, and perhaps most importantly, restraint. Why this could have turned into a crisis. All it would have taken was a misinterpreted radar spike, a nervous operator, a misaligned rule of engagement. History is full of wars that began with far less. The strategic balance holds, and for now. Instead, professionalism prevailed. Both sides approached a line and stepped back. That's how deterrence works when it works. The aftermath, off the record. There were no immediate press releases, no public accusations, but reports were written, logs archived, lessons absorbed. Encounters like this echo quietly through future planning. Unverified doctrinal impact. Some analysts suggest incidents like this influence future encounter protocols and training emphasis. These assessments are unconfirmed, but behavior shapes doctrine. The bigger picture. This was not about one destroyer or one warship. It was about boundaries. How far can pressure go before it becomes provocation? How much signaling is too much? Where does deterrence end and danger begin? Those questions remain unanswered. A Chinese warship targeted a US destroyer with fire control radar. That act alone elevated the encounter into one of the most dangerous forms of naval signaling. The US response was calm, calculated, and restrained. No escalation, no retreat, just control. In modern naval competition, wars don't start with explosions. They start with sensors, with locks, with lines crossed quietly. This one ended without incident, but it reminds us how thin the margin really is.